Dr. Sandberg, thank you for your patience and understanding as we are being creative. Please take your seats in the middle of the stage, both of you. The stage is yours, Christian and Martin.
Sorry for the delay, but we have some of our honored guests. They have to leave, and I didn't want them to leave before they meet the right people here before they go. So, Dr. Sandberg.
Martin is fine.
Martin is fine.
If
okay.
I may call you Christian.
Yes, thank you, Martin. Thank you. Martin, as I told you, I'm an unbelievable reader of Financial Times. I read with big interest your editorial and your other colleagues' editorial. They are amazing, ahead of their time, or with a very lucid judgment on things, because we have a lot of data, but we have a shortage in judgment. And people like you, also your colleagues at Financial Times, you judge things. You look at the holistic picture. Now, having said that, I have 1,000 questions to ask you, but I have very limited amount of time for you. We had a discussion. Well, first of all, you can comment if you want on our proposals, but I also would like you to comment after that on the initiative of the EU, which is, I was very amazed to hear that yesterday about the EU Inc. initiative, because it's not about the EU Inc. initiative, it's also about the fact that Europe cannot spend time trying to harmonize. The answer should be not harmonization, but bypass. And this was a great thing. And then, of course, I would like you to comment on the situation in Europe, on the French and German axis, which is, you put it very eloquently last night. So that's it. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you, everyone, for being here. There are so many things we can talk about, so I will start with some things, and then please interrupt and ask other questions and so on, because I can get long-winded. But thank you for your remarks about, well, my newspaper and the need for judgment, because it strikes me, this thought occurs to me, that as we get more and more AI incorporated in our work, we'll get more and more information and less judgment. I think that's a big risk. So I think we should all keep in mind that the need for judgment is there. And of course, that doesn't mean you should be listening to me, but you should be judging yourselves, including the things that I say. I thought it'd be useful to set your efforts in a European context to start with. And the European context is that, in a sense, everyone is facing the same problems or the same challenges in Europe as you're trying to address in your specific way in terms of encouraging entrepreneurship and capital investment. So I think two observations about the European condition, if you like, are useful. So one is there's a lack of investment everywhere. Everyone invests too little, and everyone has been investing too little for a long time. Greece was a particularly hit victim of the global financial crisis and the Eurozone crisis. Not only self-inflicted, part of it was very badly handled from the EU side, but everyone actually reacted in somewhat the same way, which was by cutting investment. More here, of course, than elsewhere, but everybody did this. And that was a mistake everybody made. Because now we are coming up to a place where everybody agrees that we have big new priorities, the green transition, infrastructure building, the digital transition, and defense, of course, all of which will require more investment, on top of a shortfall of investment for about 15 years, even before we recognize all these priorities. So we're in a bad shape already, but at least everyone has that problem. And the Draghi report, I think, is very much about that. The second observation, and I will just link us back to Robert Habeck's comments here and the discussion about the German economic model. So the German economic model is export-led growth, right? That's also the Eurozone and EU economic model writ large. Greece is an exception. You're not exporting enough. You're not export-dependent enough, as it were. But for Europe as a whole, and Greece is part of this, the previous export dependence is not a viable strategy for the future. So Germany had a great post-crisis recovery in the last decade because it was exporting to China. You can't rely on that anymore. You can't rely on exporting to the US anymore. What you can rely on, and here the German and the Greek interests coincide, is that you can trade more inside of Europe. So this is the second big observation. We're still not trading enough inside the European single market. And that goes for Greece in aggregate, and it goes for Germany in terms of where it sees its economic fortunes lying. So, more investment, the Draghi report, more single market and more trade inside Europe, the Letta report, which we should talk about as much as we talk about the Draghi report. And all of these things have solutions that can work quite well at the European level. So, coming to your proposals, they're quite Greek-specific, right? But everyone is trying to think, okay, how can we use taxation to increase investment? Let me give my reactions to your 4 proposals. So they'll be mixed. I think some are good, some I have worries about. We owe a lot to the Greek heritage, including the Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm. This is true for tax policy as well as for medicine. And what I don't need to tell any other people in this room is that the tax system is too complicated. And that's true in Greece, it's true in every country. So first of all, be very, very careful before you add complications. So the first thing I look for in a tax proposal is, apart from all else, does it simplify things? 2 of your proposals do that, the other 2 don't. So I think the threshold, the burden of proof, is much higher for a proposal that adds a complication than one that takes away a complication. So I'm totally in favor of canceling prepayments. Just get rid of it. And on your depreciation proposal, of course you should have steeper depreciation rates, but you should go a lot further than what you have. So get rid of depreciation altogether. Go for full expensing. So you mentioned the UK example. Yeah. The UK now, at the moment, has 100% depreciation for certain types of capital investment. That can still be improved. You can go for all kinds of capital investments. And just today, as an illustration of how this is a debate everywhere, just today, a group of tax experts and think tanks from completely different sides of the UK spectrum, political spectrum, came out with a list of tax reforms they want the government to offer in the next budget in a couple of weeks. One of them is to expand full 100% depreciation to all capital investment. Basically get rid of the distinction between capital and other spending in the corporate tax law. Mm-hmm. As you mentioned, for a few years in the post-pandemic recovery, the UK had more than 100%, 130% depreciation for certain types of capital. So that basically means you write off everything and you get a 30% tax credit. That was, that's a subsidy, obviously. 100% is not a subsidy. It's a liquidity management issue for the government. So that can be revenue neutral over time. And I think one way to defend it is to say, look, which entity in the economy has the bigger challenge with the liquidity? Is it the government, or is it small and medium enterprises and startups? There was an exceptional crisis time here 15 years ago where liquidity was a big issue for the government. We're not there anymore. Liquidity is an issue for startups, for entrepreneurs. They're the ones that need liquidity, and it's the government's role to take on the liquidity provision role. So, on the other 2, well, I have similar worries to Robert, for example. When you start to add categories to, give an incentive, but on certain conditions, all kinds of strange things happen around whether you qualify or not. So, in the case of the labor cost, I agree that labor costs are too high. But in a system that said you get lower labor cost for an employee you've trained, well, my worry is that ties the employee to your company. That may be good for you as an employer. Good point. but it's not so good for the economy. You want these newly upskilled people to be able to move to the company that can make most use of them.
Absolutely.
So maybe this is something that should be done on the income tax side, so it follows the employee rather than on the corporate or the sort of social security, labor cost, employer tax side. So those are things. I will stop there so you can steer the conversation where you want it.
Yes.
But again, I think first do no harm is a very good principle, and I would apply it very carefully to your 4 proposals. And I think 2 of them come out better than the other 2.
Yes. Martin, thank you so much. First of all, let me answer you with the easiest part. Exactly right what you just said about what we proposed the government. We didn't want to burden the people here with the details. What we proposed the government and what we propose in Europe is exactly what you said. Nobody should be a hostage to their employer. This is a tax certificate where you get, let's say, 100 to 1,000 euros net in your pocket, which is paid by the employer, and you can carry this tax benefit wherever you go. So it's not tied to a specific employer. Of course, there's a risk for the employer who has put the investment, the training, but so be it. You know, we are business people. We can judge whether somebody will stay with us or not stay with us, but you're absolutely correct. So this is a certificate, tax-free for portion of your income that you can take anywhere you want.
Okay.
And we also have added that on the 3rd year, because those skills, you know, are outdated, just like with CapEx on high tech, it's outdated in 3 years. Also, those skills get outdated. So to have this thing continue for the rest of your life, you have to be doing every 3 years training. Secondly, that's why we want, you're absolutely correct, capital letters. The more complicated you do things, the worse they become. You're absolutely correct. That's why we want to decouple the certification of whether this has been done or not to cover both the employer and the state for giving this tax benefit. The employer gives the extra money, the government gives the tax shield. And that's why we want to totally allocate this to private companies. Here in Greece, for instance, one thing that unblocked totally the system was that the government decided to allow the big 8 companies to take the responsibility to check the balance sheets of people and their tax statements. So whenever you're a big company and you have an auditor, one of the big 8 or an accredited party, and they check you, right? And they vouch for you in the state. So if they make a mistake and they let you go, you know, for something gray or whatever fishy, they pay very big penalties. So believe me, in Greece, we don't have a tax person coming into our company. They deal with that, the third parties, which shields us also from direct contact from the tax authorities, and puts, and they are, my experience, my personal experience, they are worse than the tax inspector. Because they are private companies, and if they do something wrong, they'll get hit. So, to cut a long story short, we're also proposing this to happen with the AI skilling, where we take the risk to pay in advance the gains in productivity, but we want the government to give a tax shelter, but it has to be totally out of the government system. It has to be just like with the balance sheet. So, but Martin, so this is about our proposal, and again, we have to find a way to incentivize in Europe companies to produce more, and if, again, sorry to say the truth, for the Southern Europe to declare more of their income. And by giving them the incentive, and Robert Habeck was correct, but when he said that, well, what about if some companies, they cut down their investments so that on the 4th year, these are correctable. We've already, and again, I don't want to burden the discussion, We've already corrected them by giving the government some choices. What would be the yardstick on which above you will give 10% instead of 25%?
So that's good to hear. Can I just draw our attention back to our Lithuanian colleague?
Yes.
And see if he's still in the audience. But he made a really important point about it has to be easy to comply, right?
Yes.
So again, I just urge you as you tweak these proposals, because sometimes this is more in government than in business, you can have very clever people who come up with very clever solutions, but they end up being so clever that it's hard to comply with. And I think it's always a good idea to keep simplicity a very high priority. And that goes to the European discussion and EU Inc. that you want to talk about as well, but I'll let you.
Yeah.
I'll let you decide where we go.
Absolutely. And actually, I had this discussion yesterday with the big associations. Yesterday, in another panel of Greek production, that is an association that works with us for the reindustrialization, is one way to reduce complication. That's what I personally. Those developmental funds from the European Union, which has benefited a lot of companies. On the other hand, they are quite complicated, and the way to simplify things along the lines you discussed is just give an accelerated depreciation, like in UK, and let the business people decide, and make a decision, and not go in front of a Greek or European Union committee to justify your investment, whether it qualifies or not. Anyway, enough with that. Thank you for your comments on our thing. Let's attack now, Martin, with this energy we have here. Let's attack the harmonization versus bypass, because I was most impressed with what you said yesterday. Please.
Look, let's. There's a broad discussion now in Europe about deregulation, right? And clearly, everyone here will know that regulation can be an obstacle to doing business if things are just too damn difficult or they take too much effort to be able to get anything off the ground. But a lot of that discussion, I think, is not always terribly evidence-based, at least the political and policy discussion. Business people on the ground where they know what they find annoying, but in terms of the policies that are put in place, it's often the squeaky wheel that gets the oil, as we say in the English expression. The people who lobby the hardest, who kind of get their way. What would be the quickest way of reducing the regulatory burden in Europe? I think it would be to replace every European directive with a European regulation, right? And the difference is a directive sets out this is what member states have to do, and then each member state does it in its own way. And all kinds of national lobbies will influence that, and it's different in every country. A regulation is one text, everyone has to do it. Enrico Letta, in his report, was advocating very strongly that the EU should make much more use of regulations than directives. Now, that's political pie in the sky, right? We're not going to see a big sweep change of directives into regulations. Maybe we'll move in the direction of using regulations more. But I illustrated to say, actually, some of the conceptually simplest deregulations out there include doing more European regulation, which would just sort of wipe away national differences. That would make it easier to trade. It would make it easier to scale up at a European level. And in some cases, it would make the regulations better. I'll leave it to you to judge whether national regulations are better than the European ones in the case of your country. But everyone can have their own judgment of that. Now, that is not going to happen, but that's where the fight should be, right? So I think it's important for the private sectors in many countries to see what could be gained by moving things to the European level. Now, there is an effort that's been thought about for years, and that's a sort of alternative to harmonization because it's so hard, which the technical term is a 28th regime. This was in the Letta report. It was in the Draghi report. There is a lobby by founders of European tech startups called EU Inc., which is calling for the same thing. And there was just a European EU consultation on this. The idea is quite simple. Instead of trying to harmonize corporate law, insolvency law, stock market law, and so on across countries, just add a new regime, 28th regime, one that's kind of isn't linked to any particular country. It kind of floats above the 27 countries. But any company can choose to incorporate under that EU scheme instead of its national scheme. So you wouldn't be incorporated in any particular country, but you'd be allowed to operate anywhere in the EU. So a Greek entrepreneur could say, all right, here are all the Greek laws. Here's the EU law, looks much simpler. I will incorporate under that. Bypass was your term for it, which I think captures very well. This would be a way to actually get a simplified regime for startups in place quite quickly. It wouldn't change anything on the ground in each country because it would be opt-in, but if it's done well, it would be an opportunity for a smart entrepreneur in Athens or in Berlin or somewhere else to get things off the ground and scale up to European level very fast. Your colleague in the association, Pavlos, told me yesterday at dinner that Greek startup founders outside of Greece have raised 10 times more money in the last 2 years than startup founders in Greece. Right? So that's telling you something. I think this is a very good idea. I think it's an idea that sounds so technical that very few people know about it. There was a consultation that just closed. I don't know how many people in this room knew about it and submitted their view of the consultation. But it's going to be in the EU work program for the next year. So I encourage you to get involved and support it. I think it could be a very quick way to bypass, as you say, some of the regulatory burden on new companies.
Very good. Just so that my compatriots understand, first of all, I have some people that are from PASOK here. This is the opposition, which ruled also or governed Greece many years. I have to say, just for people to understand what it means bypass. Bypass, to give you a simple example, is KEP, το Κέντρο Εξυπηρέτησης Πολιτών. This was as simple as it was at the time, it was a bypass. It helped so many of our compatriots, Greek citizens, to avoid dealing with the public sector. This very simple reform. So what Martin here is talking about, and again, this is something that ANA would fully support at the European level, is to overpass this and create something different instead of trying to harmonize Greek establishment companies' regulation with the one in Poland. Listen to this. This is very important. You know, all of you know, and Martin, I think I mentioned that to you yesterday, Euronext has made a bid to buy the Greek stock market exchange, which is a company. They already own 7 stock exchanges. I know them because my company is quoted in Amsterdam and it's connected to the Paris and to the Italian stock market. And their problem is not to buy the stock market. Their problem is to harmonize the capital regulations. Okay, so it's very important, and really,
which are directives, right? Not the capital requirement directive. Is it directive?
Yeah, it is.
That causes these.
It is directive, but I have to say it's also a local thing.
Because it hasn't been harmonized.
Yes, because everyone interprets things the way they want.
Yeah.
In Poland, differently than in Greece, and in the end, we end up trying to put this thing together, and it's really a waste of time. So it's better to be like that, something like that. Whoever wants to create a European, that's why I loved what you said yesterday night, create a European entity and stop dealing with the rest. And maybe the same thing, also create a European stock market that is totally independent. And, you know, so it's a very interesting concept. But Martin, I would be very foolish to let you go. Although I know you have to catch a flight, but you have time.
I have time, but
it would be a disaster if I let you go like that. I want you to comment more on the French-German axis, which is very important for us, also at the periphery of Europe, because these are the 2 countries that really drive European Union. I don't want to demean anyone else, but this is the axis. And we see, as you said, they're dancing with each other, and we need to find a time when this is harmonized, the relationship, that goes smoothly at the same time, without, again, underestimating the rest of the big players in Europe, like Poland and the rest.
Yeah, no, this is a deep question. Let me say one quick thing about the previous thing you said about stock market, because I just wanted to tie into the previous session where I think Professor George Lentzas talked about how the biggest risk is not to take a risk.
Exactly.
And when we talk about combining stock markets, we're talking about also the agenda of the Capital Markets Union, of the need to have more equity investments and equity financing across Europe, across borders, but also inside a lot of countries. So you do see some countries that are quite good at this, but if you compare Europe as a whole with the US as a whole, I think perhaps the single biggest cause of our productivity lag is that Europe has a lot of bank finance and not very much equity finance, and the US has the opposite. I'll just say that because it's something that also everyone here should be interested in pushing for more of. France and Germany have, of course, been the axes that have driven European integration forward. I think for the last 10 years, maybe a bit more, that hasn't really been the case. And I would like to start by cautioning, actually, against relying too much on France and Germany kind of fixing the problem and taking the lead. Of course, it'd be great if that happens. But here's a way of rethinking things. Which countries are more insular and inward-looking? Is it the big countries or the small countries in Europe? I mean, I'm not sure myself what the answer is, but very often when we complain about something Germany does or doesn't do, rather, when it doesn't lead, or France at the European level, it's a result of political introversion, of being just focusing about what happens internally. Now, that happens here too, of course, but being the sort of big European country, mid-sized country globally that France and Germany are, it's very easy to forget that the outside world exists. It's much harder to forget that in a country the size of Greece or Norway, where I'm from originally. So, don't forget about what small countries can do. So, there's quite a lot of thinking, interest happening in Europe now around this concept of coalitions of the willing. So obviously we talk about the coalition of the willing in terms of military support for Ukraine. But coalitions of the willing can be applied to all kinds of policy areas. And some of the things that we need at the European level, smaller countries could actually go ahead and start to do and dare France and Germany to follow. Capital Markets Union, for example. What are the countries with the most developed capital markets in Europe? It's Sweden, Denmark, the Netherlands, Ireland. Get a bunch of those countries together, the Baltics. They could start to build things together. In EU law, you have a concept called enhanced cooperation. If 9 countries want to do something together that you can't get the 27 to agree on, they can go ahead and use the union institutions. The Finance Ministry of Spain has started an initiative that they call the Competitiveness Lab. It's basically coalitions of the willing on capital markets union, financial policy issues, a common label for a European financial product, for example, common credit ratings, things that should make it easier to do things across the borders of those countries that choose to participate. Now, I haven't followed the Greek politics on this, but I would urge you to push for Greece taking part in initiatives like this. If there's a good Greek idea, you don't need to sit there and hope that Germany and France will pick it up. Go ahead and start preparing something, find willing partners, and then move. Now, if we're going to have big reform in Europe, of course we need Germany and France. France at the moment, it's kind of hard to be hopeful that you will get much leadership. I worry that there's been a lot of talking the talk on European collaboration from President Macron, and not enough. On the German side, there was quite a lot of optimism with the new government, but unfortunately, I see some of the kind of classic German reflexes of going some way down the European route and certainly talking the talk, but then suddenly saying, well, actually, no, this isn't so good for us, and you get something like asking for a delay in the 2035 target for the electrification of the car fleet. And I was very happy to hear Robert Habeck actually criticizing that. There's not enough of that inside Germany. But I've also recently heard, even on the rhetoric, you've seen Chancellor Merz coming out very strongly against the Commission, talking about how we need to do this on an intergovernmental basis. It seems to me that we need France and Germany to be not just the motor, but also to be willing to let the Commission lead on things. Take the EU-US trade deal, so-called trade deal, which was a bit of a humiliation for Europe. I think that happened largely because the Commission wasn't brave enough to do something that it wouldn't get full backing for from Germany and from France. But I think we do need the Commission to be much bolder, to actually push for initiatives and dare the big countries to stop them. You know, I was talking about Germany on electric vehicles. We could talk about France on trade with the Mercosur bloc. We've been going on for 20 years. It looks like it will finally happen. But for years, the Commission had it in its power to say, we're just going to push this to a vote and dare France to vote it down. Now, if you take that approach, you will get pushback. But also people will have to show their hand and show their cards. So I think I'm basically warning against seeing everything as revolving around the Franco-German axis. The Franco-German axis is extremely important, but it will work much better if all the other parts also do their bit. For the Commission to be much braver and dare them to stop it when it has the power. For small countries to just go ahead with things and then, again, dare the bigger countries. Did you want to be left behind here if we're building something? So, you know, it's a bit of a cliche, but we're all in this together and we all have to do it together. So don't let the nostalgia for Franco-German leadership to become a cushion for not doing enough yourselves.
Martin, thank you very much. First of all, I have to say, since we touched on Germany a lot, despite all, I think Germany has made amazing progress, and especially the last year or so, with taking leadership. And we have to always count things with what was the progress, not in absolute terms, because we would like, for instance, Germany and the Germany-French axis to take more initiative. But really, Germany has done a lot for what it used to be in taking leadership in Europe. That's our position. Anyway, I think this conference has brought us much more than we bargained because of you and because of Robert Habeck and our other guests. I wish more people in Europe would see this debate. For instance, aside from the bypass, another thing is, at the end of the day, is that it used to be an anathema to talk about Europe running in different gears at different sections of Europe. And what I think, what you're saying, and I would fully agree with you, why not? Why not? If some people want to be more aggressive and tie themselves together with some other European Union countries, why not? As you said, the coalition for the willing. I think these are the major intakes that we are already taking. I'm most grateful to you for coming here. I'm grateful for the dinner thoughts we had yesterday. We are grateful here because we got much more than what we bargained, which was using the Greek Entrepreneurs Association ideas. But here, by necessity, this has become a European issue, not for sure not a Greek issue. especially as we grow. So thank you very much. Thank you. And please continue the good work, the good editorials, that we see more judgment and less data. Okay, because at the end of the day,
Not
that's
less
what
data, but more judgment.
more judgment. Okay, more judgment. Here you go. And thank you also for, I want to stress also what you said, because people may not have heard that, the debt versus equity, which
Yes.
also ties to what Mr. Lenzes, Professor Lenzes was talking about, the risk. It really is this, we have to have less debt and more equity, more risk-taking. Thank you very much. Thank you, Martin. Thank you for being here. Thank you.
It started